I do believe there is a flow from higher worlds. I do believe that we human beings can be receptacles for that flow. And I do believe that we human beings can, as it were, shut that flow off or not. If I can just give you an example. Recently I'm teaching the Wednesday night class on the contrarian commandments for marriage. And here's one problem in most marriages. And one person says, I don't feel you love me. One person says, I don't feel you love me, and it's your fault. So the person to whom that is said says to me, what do I do with that? You know, my husband and wife says, I don't feel you love me, and as long as I don't feel it, it's your fault. And so in a way, what they're saying is, you're responsible for my feelings. If I don't feel it, you're not giving it. I said, it's actually possible that we human beings, there's a person outside of us who's radiating in a lot of love, and we pull the shade down. And we say, I don't feel the light. I have my shade down, and it's your fault. So we human beings actually block off some of the most beautiful things in our lives, including the love of another person, and then we blame them. We can block off God's influence and blame God. You know, one of my favorite cartoons of all time is, a man with a supercilious, pious look on his face is praying next to his bed, and he's saying, I've been praying and praying, God, that you make me into a better person, but apparently you couldn't be bothered, right? So that really, really sums it up for me. So that's why when you say, absolutely I pray for that, but in addition to praying, God, give me courage, I got to look inside myself and saying to myself, am I blocking that? Am I getting desperate and am I blaming other people? Am I committing the very acts that actually block the influence of the divine that can grant me courage? So this is one of the problems I have with some of the language of 12-step program. When people say, I turn it over to a higher power, I get that. It's a very blunt metaphor. But I think what people really mean is, I'm turning the conduct of my life over to my higher self. I'm not handing it to God. I'm moving the problem to my higher self. And in my higher self is where I can be the recipient of the divine flow that can help me understand my own destructive behavior. So what I tend to do in these kinds of, where I ask God for, hand the problem over to God or ask God for wisdom, I still engage in a very spiritual psychological analysis and ask, what in me is pulling the shade down so that the divine light can't get through? Because if I generally believe that the divine flow is constant, it's not that God's not present, it's that I'm not present. It's one of the first things I discovered very young was it wasn't that God wasn't present, but I was not a present human being. Meaning I was not a spiritually present person. I spent so much time with so many other things that the idea of just going inside, finding my center, making myself present to God, when I finally learned as a young man how to make myself present to God, all my questions, most of my questions about God, the essential ones disappeared. And I also learned what were the essential ones, what were the non-essential ones. God justice, it's a terrible problem, but I realized that God just can't be omnipotent, and I put that one aside. But our problem is not that God's not there, the problem is that we're not there. And if we can figure out how to make ourselves fully present to that divine flow, so much of our questions about the divine would disappear.